So this is part 2 of the baseball lines tutorial. We will walk through creating the next 3 shapes that we've been given, so these 3 geometric shapes, and we will talk about the actual baseball diamond in part 3 of this tutorial series, but let's focus on this kind of square object to start. And our last video we looked at that Celtic knot, so now we're going to look at this series of concentric squares. Now I'm going to start with this central square, and if I look at kind of the relationship between the spacing here, I can see that all of these lines are evenly spaced, with the exception of this central square. That looks to me like it's a little smaller. The spacing between the very middle of the drawing to this first line looks like it's only about half the distance as it is from this point to this point. So from my central point to this point looks like about half a unit, we'll call it, and this can represent 1 full unit. So if I think in terms of unit spacing, I'm just going to create a 1/2 by 1/2 square, and that will be this square, right? So what do I have to do to it? Well, I have to rotate it. So oops, I don't want that. I want this square. I'll copy and paste that over. And I need to rotate that square by 45 degrees. So I just pick a point on the object to rotate around and specify my rotation angle, so 45 degrees. And there we have the first step, this first square of our drawing. Now from there, I can use the offset tool. Let me get rid of that. I can use the offset tool to offset that a distance of 1 unit. So I'll specify 1 unit, click on my object, and there you can see I have step 2. And then I'll just continue offsetting 1 unit until I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outer squares, so 6 total squares if I count this middle one. And we've already got 2, so here's 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. And then all I have to do is connect the corners with a P line, and again from corner to corner, P line, which gives me this, which is basically the inner portion of this shape is complete now. So now I need to start drawing the larger box, or the larger square around this inner square. And if I pull my PDF over here, you can see we've got this inner square drawn, and now we need to draw this outer box. So how are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to start by just drawing some P lines, and I'll turn my ortho on. Ortho was on, I'll make sure it stays on. And I'm just going to draw a couple lines vertically and horizontally, and I don't have to connect them. As you can see here, I didn't connect them. What I did was I used the fillet tool, and remember always when we enter into the fillet tool to check our command line, it's telling us to specify a radius. And I want my radius to be 0. I don't want a curve, I want a sharp corner. And that's what we get if we specify a radius of 0 with our fillet tool. So I can just move along here. And I could do the same thing to create this corner, or I could be a little tricky, select these 2 lines, and I'm going to use the mirror command. So I selected this mirror button, and it's asking me specify the first point of my mirror line. Well, I want to mirror across this vertical central line, and I do not want to erase my source object. And so now I have half of what I need for my outer square. And again, I can take these 2 objects and mirror them across this midline. not erasing my source object. So now I have my outer square. Then I will just take a P line and connect from the corner, turn my ortho off, corner to midpoint, and I'll do that 4 times. So notice my midpoint snap, that little triangle is coming on, and I'll do it again, midpoint, so corner to midpoint, which gives me this shape. And then I can use my offset command once again, and I'm going to offset a distance of 1 unit, and I'll start offsetting these lines I just drew in. One more I can fit in there, and I'll continue offsetting these lines. Like such. And we're going to do that all the way around our object, so lots of offsetting. And I'm kind of doing this the long way, right? Some of you might notice that I could simply mirror all of these lines across this midline here, which would yield the same thing, or I could manually offset them all. Either way, you're going to end up with something like this. And then we can select all our lines and start trimming away, or I could have typed trim. Now notice sometimes in the trim command it will let me trim away multiple lines at once. So I didn't have to click on a dozen lines there, I just drew my selection box across what I wanted to trim and it cut them away. So I'll do that again here. Looks like we trim away the right side next, so I'll draw my selection box and you can see which lines are going to be trimmed. And I will continue trimming away. So trim, 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 missed a couple. And here I'll trim them away. And so we have our final shape. Now we just have to move some lines to the correct layer. And I guess the easy way would be to click on all these connecting lines. And I'm being careful to select only the lines I want to change. Almost done. Couple more. So I've got all the lines that I want to be gray, I've got selected, and I can simply go up to my layers and select the correct layer. And here we have a finished drawing. So that's the first shape that we're going to go through in this part of the tutorial. Next, we're going to talk about this series of concentric circles. So again, I'm going to start with this inner circle, and I'm going to assume that has a radius of 1 unit, so I'll simply draw a 1 unit circle. And using my offset command, I can just offset that inner circle until I have 3 concentric circles. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and copy it. So I'm going to copy it from the base point, and I'm going to, well, I'll just copy it a couple times. And then I think it's easier if I select one series of circles and enter the move command, or I could have selected move up here in the ribbon. And I want to move this quadrant, so I have my quadrant snap turned on. I'm going to snap it to the east quadrant of this inner circle to get this shape. Then I'll take this other circle that I copied and I will move that, select it and move it, and I'm going to take the eastern quadrant and I'm going to snap it to the west quadrant of my inner circle. So I get this shape. Then I can draw a couple of P lines. So P line, and I'm going to snap from the north quadrant to the north quadrant, and also from the south quadrant to the south quadrant to give me this. And then I can do some trimming. So notice I've trimmed away the remainder of this first outer circle. So I can select my lines, type trim, and I want to trim away these portions of the circle I don't need. And I'll do the same thing again, trim, and trim away the portions that I don't need until I have this. Now this is most of the line work that we need, and we can start moving objects to different layers. So if I pick these two circles and select my red dashed layer, you can see we're starting to get close. And then I need to add some more polylines. So I will enter the polyline command, and I'm going to go from midpoint to midpoint, or quadrant to quadrant. They should be in the same place. Here's midpoint to midpoint, yielding this shape. And I'll throw in a couple more P lines for these smaller circles. So quadrant to quadrant, north quadrant to south quadrant, giving us this. And then I want to extend these lines past the boundaries of my border here. If I go back to the PDF drawing, you can see these lines extend beyond the boundaries of this outer ring, and also this vertical line extends beyond the boundaries of the red dashed circle. So I'm going to have to extend these lines a little bit. And if I look at the PDF, it looks like they extend about a half a unit beyond the boundary line. Same with this line, it's about halfway between, so about a half a unit extension beyond. And that's what it would give us. And how I did that was I looked at this line, and if I select it and just use the grip edit, it tells me right now it's 4 units. I don't know if you can see that under my, there we go, 4 units in the dynamic input box. Well, I can start moving my cursor up and type 4.5 to make the total length of the line 4.5 units. And there it's extended that line a half a unit upwards. I can do the same thing. Now the total length of my line is 4.5 units. I want to extend it down another half a unit to make the total length 5 units. Would be one way to do that, or I could just say I want the total length to be 5 units, and then move that line from the midpoint back to where it should be. This line 14 units long, so I need to make it a total of 15 units long, and then I can move it from the midpoint back to the center. And same thing here, if I hover over one of the grip edits, it tells me it's 6 units long, and I can stretch it, make it 7 units long, and move that line from the center point back to where it should be. So that's all the line work. Now I just need to move some of these lines to the correct layer. So these lines obviously go to my gray center line dashed layer, and that will give us a finished drawing. So that's shape number 5. Shape number 6 is this kind of pinwheel. And again, I'm going to start with the circle. I'm going to start with the easiest shape. And there are no units in this drawing, so I'm going to assume let's just say a 5-unit radius. So I'll draw a 5-unit radius circle, which is what we have here. And I will just connect quadrants with a polyline. So I'll draw a polyline command, and quadrant to quadrant, and again quadrant to quadrant. And then I want to actually rotate that shape. I want to rotate it 45 degrees. So I can again connect quadrant to quadrant with a P line. So I'm going to go quadrant to quadrant and quadrant to quadrant, giving us this shape. Now what I have to do is start converting to arc. So if I click on one of these lines and I hover over the center grip edit, convert to arc is one of the options. If I select that, and look at what happens if I snap to the midpoint on one of these lines. So I'll snap to the midpoint. Oh, I know why it's not letting me snap to midpoint. So I'm going to convert this back to a line. I forgot. The first thing I have to do is add vertices. Right now this is one continuous line, and I need basically a half a line, but I need 2 of them. And I could do the same thing with this line, or I can add a vertex right at the middle. So now I can convert to arc and snap to the midpoint on that line. Same thing here, convert to arc, snap to the midpoint, convert to arc, snap to the midpoint, convert to arc, snap to the midpoint. So I have this shape. We're almost done. Now I can delete these drafting lines and then simply draw in a couple of P lines connecting the north and south and east and west quadrants, giving us this shape. And then simply move these to the correct layer that has that gray center line type. And I can extend out maybe a unit on each side like I did in the last shape, and we have a finished drawing. So that's the second half of the baseball lines sort of geometric shapes, and in the third video we will tackle the actual baseball diamond.